Thank you all for joining us today. We're very excited to deliver this webinar about mastering CX metrics for business growth. For those who are new and who don't know me, my name is Antonia Calvo. I am Managing Director of ActXM, and I'm here today with Ngoc. She's a Senior Research Manager, and she works with many of our clients to create and deliver customer and employee experience programs. ActXM, we are a market research and experience management consulting organization. We deliver customer, employee, brand, and research programs to our clients. We have a strong focus on the Qualtrics platform. We are the leading Qualtrics implementation partner in Asia Pacific. Before we start, a couple of housekeeping notes. This webinar is expected to last about 45 minutes, and we will have about 10 minutes at the end to address your questions. We will also follow up with a record of the webinar as well as the PowerPoint presentation. So in our agenda today, we would like to share with you how we at ActXM think of customer experience and its elements. Customer experience is made up of emotion, effort, and success, and we'll talk about this in detail in the hope that will help you build out your own CX metrics. We will then briefly cover the impact of CX into your business by looking at how customer satisfaction influences brand trust, likelihood to repeat business or purchase, and recommendations. The third point in our agenda will give you the tools to build a framework of CX metrics to suit your organization. We will look at how you can set up strategic CX metrics, experience drivers to help you measure the impact on those strategic CX metrics, as well as financial and operational metrics that can make up the overall CX framework. Ngoc will then take this to the next level and apply the framework to 3 use cases: customer care, digital experience, and journey-based experience. Finally, we will look at how brand and customer experience are integrated. We know that brand experience can shape customer satisfaction or customer expectations. And we know customer experience can reinforce and undermine brand perception. We will lay out the process to enable you to measure the impact of customer experience in brand perceptions and vice versa. So let's get started. What is customer experience? What is the best way to define and categorize customer experience in a way that can help you design metrics for your business? The best way to put it is that customer experience is not about your process or your people. It really is how your clients perceive the interactions that they have with your organization. And to help frame this, it's helpful to think about experience from the point of view of emotion, effort, and success. So asking yourself, especially as you start developing the questionnaires and start thinking about the metrics and what are the right metrics for my business and my organization, it's helpful to ask some questions around these 3 elements and items. So how long it take or how hard was it for the client to get through the right person and get the information that they needed? How did the client feel during that process? What is the emotion associated with it? And did the client get what they needed? And if not, why not? The integration of the emotion, the effort, and the success, and creating a really comprehensive framework of metrics that you can use to measure the customer experience, but more importantly, to address any the performance and be able to put the right action in place to deliver a better experience to your customers. So this approach does recognize that successful customer experience is not only about the outcome, whether or not your customer were able to achieve the end results. It's also about the journey, the effort that they went through to achieve that result, as well as how did you make your customer feel during that process. It's a system that we use often when we develop the questionnaires to help us frame customer experience in a more holistic manner. Now, let me share with you some examples on how you can use these emotion, effort, and success in your business, especially in developing those metrics for your questionnaires. So I want to cover what is it, each one of these elements, why it matters, and what questions can you ask. So what is emotion? Really refers to the feelings and emotional responses triggered by an interaction and experience with your brand. Can have a feeling of joy, satisfaction, frustration, disappointment. Why it matters? I mean, ultimately, we all have heard about this. Like, there's a lot of research that proves that when people have a strong emotion feeling about something, they are more likely to remember positively or negative. So we know that positive emotions lead to higher customer satisfaction and more likelihood to repeat business and be advocates of your business. But conversely, the other also happens. Negative emotions can lead to churn and negative word of mouth. And then finally, how to measure. I mean, you can ask questions related to like overall satisfaction. In a way, can be a way of measuring that emotion. What we find really interesting, and we have been applying this to with a lot of our customers, is leveraging Qualtrics, Text IQ, text analytics capability. You have your overall satisfaction question or your NPS, and you ask the open-ended feedback why you are satisfied or dissatisfied, why you are a promoter or detractor, using that content and structure data, put it into topics. The tool now is able to give you the sentiment associated with those responses, but more important is also giving the emotions. So it spells out emotions like joy, frustration, feeling good. So there's the AI that is being incorporated into the technology definitely helps measure these the emotion part of the experience. In terms of effort, so what it is very simple. This idea of measuring the ease or difficulty and experience by the customer in accomplishing a specific task or a goal, and it can be, purchasing a product, finding information or getting support. Why it matters? Well, we know there's a very strong correlation between effort and general satisfaction, loyalty, and this is with every customer we work with, and have worked with hundreds of them. When we look at their data, if it has taken a lot of effort for someone to do something, most likely there is a correlation. The satisfaction is also negative. So we know that is important, and so you want to be able to measure the effort because it will have an impact on satisfaction. How to measure? Customer effort score is your typical and the most common metric, and can be used, for example, how much effort, how easy or hard it was to, like can get more specific, find the information or applying to a specific product. Vicky, I noticed you put your hand up. Great to see you here. I forgot to mention, we're actually going to go through Q&A at the end. So I might just answer all the questions at the very end. If you want to put them into the Q&A section, I'll then make the time to answer them at the end. All right, and carry on with the success. Hopefully that's okay, Vicky. What is success? So it is about measuring. Success measures whether or not the customer was able to achieve what they set out to do. So they contacting your customer service team, were you able to resolve the problem or the reason why they contact the customer service team. They set out or went to your website or portal to sign up for new products. You are a banking financial institution, and you use your website for people to apply to new products. Were they able to do that? So being able to measure the success of applying, making purchase, getting information, it's very important. Why it matters? Well, we know successful interactions influence satisfaction, but also if they are achieving what they want, especially on acquisition point of view, there is can be a strong connection with your financial metrics as well. How to measure? Success can be measured through post-interaction surveys. So they can be success post contact center where you're able to achieve or get your query answer, but it can also be post-visit on the website, on the app, on a portal. Can be a journey-based success metric as well. So we all know, we're moving on a little bit from the emotion, effort, and success, and we're going to come back to this as we start creating the framework. I just want to stop here a moment because often we have heard about these positive connections between good experience or satisfaction and the business outcomes. And it's always a good time to remind that why we're doing this and what are the benefits of having a customer experience program and success metrics in your business. So some statistics here: consumers are 3.3 times more likely to trust the brand after a positive experience. And this is a good metric and reference, as we're going to talk a little bit more about brand metrics later on. Consumers are 2.6 times more likely to purchase after a positive experience. So again, this is a critical statistic, especially as you start bringing in together CX feedback with your financial metrics and outcomes. And then less than 50% of the customers will recommend the brands after a 3-star experience. Again, we know the connection between NPS and positive experience is well known. So there's nothing new in here, but I think it's always helpful to remind ourselves of these key metrics and maybe share it with your business stakeholders as you display your case and build up your case for a customer experience program. Just one moment. Right, now we're going to start talking a little about what are the right metrics for your business. And the funny thing is that we can talk about satisfaction, we can talk about NPS, and sometimes you have efforts, and then suddenly you have 20 different metrics that you can potentially use and can feel a little bit overwhelming. Like which ones do you use? Are you a team NPS, a team CSAT? What operational metrics are most relevant to my business? It's not necessarily straightforward, but I think what we usually recommend our customers, and as we engage with different organizations, it's really important to think about your business and the business context. So if we think about the feedback and the experience type of metrics, some of you work on industries that actually have regulatory environments where you may have to report back to the government. Around like healthcare is a typical use case. You have the well-being index, for example, so that should definitely be part of your experience metrics. Other industries, they may be a little bit more on a competitive landscape, and so using NPS as your core experience metric may be helpful because there's a lot of benchmarks around NPS. So there's definitely considerations that you need to think about your type of business and your business context. I'm a team satisfaction when it comes to feedback experience, and I'll talk a little bit more about that as to why later on. Another consideration is thinking about your business operations context. If you have a full program, you most likely probably have a full team backing you up, and so you can create more complex CX metric framework. Also taking consideration which channels your customers interact and engage with, which is a contact center, or do you have contact center, digital, branch, store? So a multitude of different channels is to take that in consideration, because we want to have a metric that is consistent across all of these channels, because it allows you to compare. It's a satisfaction usually works better. But if you have a very complex customer journey, again, you want to use satisfaction or NPS. So there's a variety of different things that you want to consider, and ultimately you want to make sure that the metric you're measuring today is consistent and allows you to monitor that over time. When it comes to operational and finance metrics, it's a good practice to meet and discuss with your business stakeholders what's important to them, what matters from operational and finance metrics, and try to bring in those as part of your CX program framework. Thinking about the strategic goals, like is it the priority around new customer acquisition, or is it the priority to increase profit and therefore focus on retention, upselling, or reduce costs? So whatever is the business priority actually is going to help dictate potentially what operational and financial metrics are you building into your framework of customer experience metrics. So with that, let me walk you now through how we typically design this framework and how we structure it. It's good practice, again, to start with your core strategic metrics. So identify a set of metrics that reflect the overall customer satisfaction and experience, and this can be CSAT, Net Promoter Score, trusts. I have some customers use meeting expectations. I think in a few years' time, once we all get into AI and analyzing unstructured data, sentiment could be another core strategic metric. The next step is you have your satisfaction or your NPS, which are the most commonly used. The next one is thinking about the touch point specific metrics, and you want to combine these, like you have your call center overall satisfaction. But when interacting with call center, it's really important to also be measuring the first time resolution or your task completion or customer effort score. And the same applies to the digital experience. So the questions may vary slightly, but ultimately what you want is to combine and bring together your core strategic metric with metrics that are specific to the touch points. The next level of metrics is what we call the experience drivers. Experience drivers, the best way to put it is, well, as the name says, what is driving that overall satisfaction? What is driving the Net Promoter Score up or down? Is really being able to understand what has a correlation with your core strategic metrics. So you start thinking about if your customer is interacting with staff, you think about metrics like the friendliness and the knowledge, or your survey is about the process. You dive into the drivers of that customer journey. I'm not going to go too much into detail here because we have a whole section from Ngoc on around these drivers and the metrics for the different use cases. But what we do want to point out is your series of metrics really should include the core strategics and touchpoint specific. Think about the experience drivers. And then we're going to move on to operational metrics. So again, these will depend on your survey and different stages of the journey or touch points. And it can be things like contact frequency, abandonment rates on your website, time to resolution. And then the final one will be a set of metrics relating to the finance side of things. So customer lifetime value, new acquisition, retention, attrition. These are just some examples. And obviously, we do find, especially operation and financial metrics, tend to be very specific to the business and the clients that we work with. Whatever you end up with, you want to make sure that these metrics and the insights you get from these metrics can be fed into and translate into action. So you want to ensure the insights are actionable, and you can put them into strategies to ultimately improve the customer experience. So good practice is always asking yourself as you develop the metrics, so what? So what can I do about this? And do I have the ability to do something to improve that particular part of the customer experience? And I also want to say that often you don't just assume, especially around the drivers metrics and operation financial metrics. I mean, the core strategic, in a way, they should be consistent because it allows you to view and the trends over time, which is obviously important. But you should be able to regularly review both the touch point and the drivers metrics to ensure that they remain relevant and are aligned with the business goals and the customer expectations. So be prepared to adapt and evolve. If I have to change, that's okay. You know, at the end of the day, you know, can always go back to what you had before. So we find that flexibility to the way you manage the program is critical to get long-term value. Now I'm going to pass you on to Ngoc, and I'm just actually going to switch the because Ngoc can't get on.
Oh, can't get my video on.
Yeah, it's okay, Ngoc, if you want to have a look at what you have on your screen. Ngoc is going to talk through the different use cases to develop CX metrics for customer care, digital experience, and journey based. Yeah. Oh, I think I need to unmute myself. I carry on and I forget to do. Sorry, Johnny is going to hate us. She's our marketing manager. And she is a perfectionist. There you go.
Okay, hopefully everyone can hear me okay, and apologies with my video not working as well. So I guess with the next section, I'm just going to be going through the framework that Antonia's talked about and how you can incorporate that into your CX program by choosing the right metrics as well. I'm going to cover off customer care. I'm also going to do a quick one on digital experience, and then at the end touch on the journey-based experiences and showing you some different use cases as well. Okay. Next slide, please. Now, with customer care, I've kind of broken it up into 3 sections. I've got contact center, I've got healthcare, and I've also got store and branch as well. Antonia, if you can go on to the next slide, that would be great, because look, there's a lot of information on this next slide coming up. What I have on the left-hand side is obviously the framework that we've gone through. With the contact center, the healthcare, as well as the store and branch, please keep in mind what you are seeing is just some examples of the metrics that you would use. It's quite high level. So I might just focus on the contact center one for now. So if you can imagine when a customer has a query or needs to contact you by your call center, you know, some examples that we've done for clients is, you know, reaching out to your local council, maybe booking your car in for a service, potentially calling your bank to discuss your accounts. Maybe querying an invoice is another way to measure the contact center part of things as well. Okay. Having a look at the core metric, obviously, I am also an advocate for overall satisfaction, and then those customers online watching as well will know that I prefer satisfaction, but I will touch on NPS in a few slides down the track. So with the contact center, you want to measure the satisfaction of the interaction. You also want to measure it at different touch points. But I think what I want to draw more focus on is the drivers, right? What we want to focus on is the staff drivers at this point in time. So friendliness, knowledge, understanding, okay? If you're doing it for a store or a branch, you still want to measure those metrics on the staff, but you may want to consider adding some physical metrics like cleanliness of the store, accessibility, wayfinding, as well as another metric that you may want to measure. So having a look at this, I just want to reiterate, you need to have the right metrics, which will then help you with your overall customer framework. And in addition, for your organization to monitor these metrics. Okay, I'm talking about organization and I want to now touch on operational and financial, right? So you need to think about your business, your industry, what operational data do you have available to you? You might want to meet with your business stakeholders to get an understanding of what data is available from the data team. You may have some financial metrics available that you can actually pull in and report on as well. And I think having operational and financial then allows you to share the information with others inside your organization and make them accountable as well. So everyone in the team is working on the customer feedback program. Okay. I think what I do want to also mention is that with the metrics, we have so many, and I'm going to show you a few slides down the track how you can report all these metrics in one place. Okay. Don't forget, metrics can be specific to your industry and your business. I'm just going to mention healthcare now because I've got that on. Think about KPIs potentially that stakeholders want to see scores for. Besides satisfaction in healthcare, they may want to measure NPS, or they may want to measure PWI, which is the Personal Wellbeing Index. Okay. We might move on to the next slide, which is digital experience. And again, I've broken these down into 3 areas. So we've got the web and the app, the customer portal, and the chat. Antonia, on the next slide, I've again got the framework. I've got the 3 surveys as well. And I kind of want to use a clear example of a customer's journey when they're applying for a home loan. So with the web app side of things, it's measuring how they have found the information. Okay. Also, have they been able to find out all the information that they need on their website? Other drivers potentially for the website is ease of completing the task, time it took to take to complete the task, and most importantly, navigation. Okay. Next, I kind of want to move on to the customer portal. So you think about it, I've gone onto your website, I've looked for information on the home loan, I've applied, I now am a customer and I've gone into the portal. What we now want to think about measuring is not only my satisfaction with the portal, but when I have been on the portal, why have I been there? Have I been able to complete the task? Also, is there the ability to self-serve in this customer portal? Also, in this day and age, with everything going on, you do want to measure the security and the safety of the portal as well. Okay, we might go on to the chat bit, Antonia. Really, again, in the customer journey, if they need to contact support, and again, this goes back to what I was talking about with contact center, is measuring their overall experience with chatting to your business. It can be via different channels as well. I've just popped chat in there, but it could be chat via web, via your app, via the phone, maybe email as well. So think about what is needed for your business. Okay. Just down the bottom, we've got some examples for the operational and the financial as well. So again, just reiterate, you do want to customize these to your business and your industry as well. Okay. I think I'm going to go on to the next slides, which really is about the journey-based experiences. And what I'll do is just go up slide. So looking, and I'm going to use the home loan example again as well. Looking at the 3 phases with discovery, we then have the application, and then we have the account set up. I want to have mention satisfaction. With overall satisfaction, you do want to measure this at the customer's journey. Probably this would be a good time then to bring NPS in, probably at the account setup time. Again, it depends on your business. If you've got clear advocates for NPS, then you may want to consider adding NPS as a question in every single survey that you have. I do also want to mention that when you are choosing your metrics, think about the journey, okay? What you need to do is ensure that you have some key metrics that you are consistently asking in every single survey. So what I mean by that is having your satisfaction, having a couple of key drivers to measure as well, okay? And then where possible, bring in NPS if needed. Okay. What I want to let you know as well is with this journey, obviously we can create it as separate surveys. We can also create it as one large single survey where you bring in the right drivers for the different parts of that customer journey. Okay, I know I've covered off a lot of content. There's a lot of examples on there. I guess you're all thinking, what does this all mean? What does it look like visually at the end? And this is when I'm going to get Antonia to go on to the next slide. So the next few slides are just examples of dashboard widgets. Okay, this is not real a customer. It is a sample, so keep that in mind as well. So with this next slide, what it's showing you is it's looking at the customer satisfaction metric across the different parts of a customer's journey. So you can see that when the discovery phase is happening, their satisfaction is very high at 100%. Okay, you can then start to see it drop, and it's quite interesting that at the application process, there's a clear difference between their satisfaction when they do the application on the app or when they complete the application on their website. Okay, I think this is a classic example of how you can use this information and share this within your teams. You can then work with other parts of your business. You can show them this data, and then you can say, what is the difference between applying on the app and the web? How can we make the website application just as good as applying on our app? Okay. With the next slide as well, I know there's some advocates for NPS, so I just did want to show you what this would look like with NPS as your core metric. And again, this is an example of looking at the NPS across the different products. And again, putting my data hat on, I'm looking at the results. What's the difference between the mortgage application and the credit card application? Okay, this may be something that you bring back to the team as well to have a discussion and action plan. You can see on the bottom, though, that we've also brought in operational data here. So the number of visitors as well. So keep this in mind. It's just an example. You may want to pull in other operational data. You may want to pull in some financial data, maybe customer tiering or something like that. Okay, I'm going to go on to the next slide. And thinking about everything that we've discussed, this probably is a good example that you want to use for your exec sum. Okay, I'm going back to what Antonia spoke about with the 3 essential elements of CX. We've got the emotion there with the satisfaction. We've got success with the task completion rate. And then we've got effort with ease of use. And you can see with the line chart that you can track these metrics over time as well. Okay. I think finally, using all these metrics, having your core metrics, having your touch points, having all this data, what does it do? What does it mean? I want to draw your attention onto the key driver analysis. And this really allows you to see the correlation between one outcome metric, and in this instance, satisfaction, with potential drivers. I have to say most of our clients have these widgets in their dashboards. They use it to have discussions with different parts of their business as well, okay? And one of the things you want to ask is, how can we increase satisfaction? What is highly correlated to satisfaction? I'm going to use this example that you see on screen as well. So you can see you have your 4 quadrants. The top right, product information, highly correlated, and your score is high as well. Okay, so you want to maintain that. If you wanted to have a look at a quick win, then you would look at your top left-hand quadrant where you need to prioritize. So in this instance, it's the call center support and it's the ease of account application. Okay, so what this means is it's highly correlated to increasing satisfaction, but right now the scores are very low, sitting at about under 20 and then at 40% as well. Okay, there's a lot of information. I think this particular widget is key. I want to mention that you need to have the right metrics in order to utilize this widget effectively, okay? So that takes me back to think about your framework. think about what your core metric is. Think about your touch points. Think about some of the drivers that you have. Maybe add in some drivers that you need from the business, from speaking to your stakeholders. It may be KPIs as well. And then pulling in operational data, financial data where possible as well. If you get this part right, you can then use this for action planning, what you need to work on, and then also strategically about what's the next steps for the organisation. I'll hand it over to Antonia now, who's going to be talking about combining customer and brand metrics.
Thank you, Ngoc. It's really helpful. We have a few questions. We have a few questions for you, Ngoc, but we'll go through those in at the end of the session. I'll have probably another 10 or so minutes to talk about brand and customer experience, and then we'll address your questions. All right, so right, here we are. When we talk to business leaders, they know intuitively that the brand promise and the claims that you're making, your marketing, your advertising, that they are only as good as the experience that your customers receive. So there is that in a way correlation between brands and the experience that your customers receive. This quote here from Shake Shack expressed well the sentiment that we are hearing from our clients, where you must understand, or we must understand our customers' brand expectations, and then we must deliver relentlessly against those expectations. And that's what I want to talk about a little bit today, to help introduce some new concepts in terms of your experience management program overall, and how you can bring in brand and customer experience together, and what steps you potentially can start taking now to be able to do those analyses and correlations in the future. Companies, they do need to go beyond just a simple intuition and move to a more holistic and effective way of capturing this connection and this linkage between brands and customer experience. Brand perceptions can shape customer experience and can shape customer expectations. So if you are, your brand is promoting as a premium brand, super amazing service, and that is, promoted and communicated to the markets, and then your customers come in and they don't have necessarily the same experience, that can have a negative impact on your brands. But similarly, customer experience does reinforce or undermines the brand perception. So positive customer experience can reinforce the brand promise, strength, brand loyalty, and advocacy, which are important metrics from a brand point of view. And same negative experience can, on the other hand, diminish the trust and deter potential customers from engaging with your organization. Some of the key benefits that can emerge from aligning CX metrics with your brand values are, for example, being able to identify what are the most significant brand promise and experience, what is more important to both the market in general as well as your customers. So we do that by combining the brand and customer and the customer experience data. Being able to understand which customer experience align with the brand promise. So again, whatever you communicating and promising your customers or the markets that your brand is all about, are you able to deliver against those promises as your customers engage with your organization? Another element is related to evaluating whether enhancements in customer experience correlate with improvements in brand health. So we may identify that safety, for example, is one of your brand promise. However, your customer experience data does not show safety as being something that you deliver on as per their expectations. You can implement measures to improve safety, or at least the perception of safety with your customers. Does that over time then reflects on the brand promise, on the brand health. And then finally, recognizing the customer experience that have a lasting impact on brand health. So what is it that you're delivering to your customers that keeps them coming back and boost that loyalty and share of wallet as well. Your customers spending more money because your customer experience is having an impact on the brand perception, brand health. So how we go around this is it's not necessarily overcomplicated. It's actually a few steps that you need to put together. The first one obviously is start measuring brand and customer experience, and you also want with this step make sure that your CX metrics are aligned with your brand metrics, which often is something that we don't see. Like when we look at brands type of surveys, the questions have nothing to do with the questions we ask you on the customer experience surveys, which like you need to, right? You need to be able to ask the similar type of questions and measure the same thing to be able to compare whether or not you are delivering against those promises. So the first step is, do you have a brand and a customer experience program running? And if you do, making sure that we have a list of statements, metrics that align. The second step is once you have these surveys in place and running, we want to be able to report on both together and start identifying relationships and indicators that will emerge from the brand and the customer experience surveys. And then the next final step is the full cross-analytics. So for those of you, obviously you are all Qualtrics users, or at least in the process of becoming Qualtrics customers, you may have heard about CrossXM, and CrossXM has been around and put into practice for employee and customer experience, and there's more functionality associated with CrossXM for customer and brand programs. And what it does, so we have done the work right before, which is aligning the questions and measuring customer and brands, reporting and starting identifying relationships and leading indicators. The next level of analysis is to be able to identify, first of all, any gaps between your brand promise and the actual experience, which is what we call experience alignment. And then the second part of the cross analytics component is being able to prioritize initiatives based on the ability to shift both brand and customer experience metrics. So it's effectively the experience impact part. So let's go through these a little bit more detail. So how do you align? I'm just going to use some simple examples here just to help you start picturing this framework. So how do you align your brand and customer service? So you'll need to start thinking about the promise. So identify your brand promise and the reasons to believe statements that need to be present on both surveys. And so usually we're talking about 3 to 10 statements. I have an example here. Volvo, their brand promise is safety, quality, and then environmental care. And then they have reasons to believe, like 6 or 7 reasons to believe. And I'm listing down a couple here, like top safety on crash tests and high quality materials. So what we want now to do is take on this brand promise, these reasons to believe, and translate those into survey questions that we can apply on your customer experience surveys, as well as your brand market research surveys. So that could be, for example, in your customer experience question, you could ask questions around, overall satisfaction with the quality of the materials. And in your brand, it can be a perception about how do you perceive Volvo high quality materials, and is it a positive or a negative perception? Because we then using these statements across both surveys, we'll be able to link them together. The second thing that we need to do as part of this alignment between brand and customer experience is defining the outcome metrics. So we need to identify and include on surveys the core measures of brand and customer health. And this is nothing new. This usually would be the metrics that you already have on your customer and brand studies. A brand outcome metric is typically future purchase, consideration, attitudinal equity, overall liking, and your outcome CX metrics are your overall satisfaction, NPS, intent to visit. The reason I'm calling these out is the promise and the outcomes is basically we need to have these these elements in both questionnaires to be able to run those analyses in the back end. The second step then, as I mentioned, is start identifying the relationships between CX and brands. And you don't necessarily need to overcomplicate this process too much. It can be just in the simple form of, well, start reporting both brand and customer experience in one single place. Having your trend analysis and your metrics aligned side by side, you're going to start seeing and emerging trends, and the data itself will start getting interrelationship between the two metrics. And we say that you need to do this step in between, because the step 3, it typically requires 3 to 6 months at least worth of data, so that you have enough data to be able to run some advanced analysis on your CX and brand programs. But it really then takes us to the ability of measuring the experience impact, which is really discover which experience matter the most to your customers. And that's really, we look at out of these statements that we talked about before, your brand statements, we're able to view how they impact an outcome metric like brand equity, for example, and how or what is the correlation with the drivers like NPS or recommendation, for example. So depending where they fall into this quadrant, will basically tell the organization whether or not you need prioritize, execute, monitor, or advertise. So if they fall into the prioritize area, it means that they are important to the brand equity and they are important to your CX metrics. So you need to prioritize those. If they fall into your customer service area, to the advertise area, so it means they are important to the brand equity, but not necessarily as important in terms of driving that customer experience. And then the other side, and the other outcome is experience alignment. So really it's about discover which customer experience are aligned with your brand promise. So are you delivering against that brand promise? And similar to the experience impact, puts it into 4 different quadrants, and it basically ends up telling you, depending where they fall, what you need to prioritize what you need to focus on in terms of the delivery. Is it disappointing? Would be statements that the customer experience is really poor, but you are basically over-promising. So that's where we fall onto the disappointment area. Obviously, this can be a lot more complicated in the sense that developing a full alignment between CX and brands takes time. But it's something that we wanted to share with you today, because there's definitely a very strong correlation and importance of seeing both brands and customer experience together. And it's something that you start considering as your programs evolve, especially helpful for those organizations that have had customer experience program for a number of years. It's a great way of lifting up the conversation around customer and the connection of customer experience with brand health metrics. We're almost at the end, so I just want to summarize, and then we'll go to the Q&A session. So today we cover the 3 elements of customer experience, being emotion, effort, and success. And really this idea that successful customer experience is not just about, again, the outcome, it's also about the journey and how it makes your customer feel. We then went through give you hopefully some tools in how you can develop your CX metric framework. And it's really important to go beyond just your core strategic metrics. We want you to include touch point specific and drivers metrics to help you understand your customer experience, and more importantly, to be able to act on that feedback. Complementing CX metrics with operational and financial metrics are relevant to your business. And then we've closed it off around brand perceptions and the idea that brand perceptions shape customer experience, and customer experience reinforce or undermines the brand perception. So it is critical for organizations to be able to measure the mutual impact between brand and customer experience. We're going to open up now to Q&A. And while we look at those questions, if you want to take a minute of your time to complete this survey, like put up the QR codes and give us your feedback, and also tell us what else you'd like to hear from us in the next few sessions or the next few webinars. So I'll start from the top. What is the industry email response times for contact centers? Do you have that?
Not industry specific, no.
What is the typical average that we see on contact centers?
With the email responses, probably about 5 to 10% with the email responses.
Yeah. So 5 to 10%. It really also depends on when do you trigger those surveys? Is it 1 week later? Definitely the response rate is not going to be as high. Is it immediately? You're much more likely to have a higher response rate. What number correlation score is classed as good, strong relationship? We usually put the benchmark around 0.5 up is strong correlation. But also, and usually it depends also how well you choose your drivers, right? So there will be some drivers, and sometimes we start working with customers as they set up the program, and we see all the drivers under 0.20. That's usually tell us the drivers are not very relevant to the overall experience or the connection with the NPS or CSATs. But yeah, 0.5 usually a strong correlation, and then you potentially want to look at anything 0.3 to 0.49 as a medium correlation. Manish, great to see you here. Thanks for sharing. On key driver analysis, how do we determine the correlation between the drivers? Is there an analytical way to do this, or is more input from business? The driver analysis, Manish, is a Pearson correlation test that the tool runs. So is effectively is a correlation score between the outcome metric, which is usually on CX, NPS or satisfaction, and the drivers. And so that relates to the question we just had before. 0.5 up usually indicates a strong correlation. And the key driver analysis also put it in the correlation as well as the satisfaction or the performance. And that's why we're able to look at it and prioritize the feedback. When doing the driver analysis, everyone loves the driver analysis. It's great to hear that. We are big fans of driver analysis too. Do you have a filter? Do you have to filter your data on channel use? Otherwise, some drivers app will not be relevant to all cases. Correct, but I also think that depends on how you design your dashboards. If you have on a page, you feed in all the drivers, then yes, apply a filter based on the channel, or could be based on the journey, right? So that really depends on how you design your dashboard. Was the key driver quadrant built for multiple surveys, or is it one survey? It's a similar question from multiple. How is the importance derived? So you can build a driver quadrant for multiple surveys. But again, you most likely need to apply a filter if you want to get down to a channel or a journey. If you don't apply a filter and the metrics make sense, like for example, let's pick up the example of digital channels, right? You most likely have app and websites and portal, for example. You have your satisfaction score across all of these, and you probably have similar drivers. So if you are displaying the quadrants for all of these together, the correlation score is going to be about the full, all the channels together. So it basically pulls up a master data list of the feedback that we've received across all the channels. How is the importance derived? So again, it's a correlation analysis. So it looks at the relationship between the driver, and metric by metric, like one metric looks at the relationship of one driver to the outcome metric. Is NPS becoming less reliable as respondents are more aware of what different scores mean and how people are using it? we suspect CSAT is better, but we need to sell it into the business help. We keep referring to CSAT. Look, I think we refer as a metric to measure the performance across channels, across journeys. We find CSAT a much more reliable metric. Just you can easily apply it to any situation, right? How satisfied were you with website? How satisfied were you with the application process or with the interaction with our contact service team? And similar to industries, like you can ask satisfaction about an interaction basically on any industry, where NPS is much harder to, sometimes just doesn't even make sense, that recommendation. Like we have a lot of customers in the council and local governments, and how likely are you to recommend the council or the contact center? It doesn't really make sense. However, in the local council space, we do have customers using NPS as how likely are you to recommend the area, which I think is actually quite an interesting, smart way to do it. So I'm sorry to have like a straight answer to this. I think there's never is a straight answer to NPS. NPS can be, however, a good tool if you are in a very competitive industry and it's critical for you to benchmark your organization to other organizations in the industry. You have a lot more metrics or benchmarks for NPS. But I think if you can you look another way is you could have CSAT across the channels, across the journeys. And then if you have a strategic type of annual type of survey, you will have your NPS as that additional metric. How can we work out overall impact on the CX metric? The drivers are different by different channels. Isn't it best to have the same drivers across everything? Not necessarily, because not all the drivers don't necessarily apply the same way to all the different channels. So I think the way we will go about this, which Ngoc shared, you potentially, I may just actually go a few steps back. You may want to, for example, start looking at the journey, right? So your first step will be where in my journey am I failing and what area is performing better or worse? And then from there, you start looking at the driver specific to the web or live chat. Definitely not necessarily this idea of having the same drivers across everything, because the drivers need to be specific to the journey and the channel and the interaction. Agree?
Yeah. You may want to consider having your overall satisfaction as the outcome metric, but with the different channels, with the different journey, think about maybe one or two drivers that you could use consistently throughout the journey, potentially throughout the channels as well. I'm going to say communication as one. That's just, you know, so that's something that you could measure at every part of the journey as well.
Yeah, and we talk about the touch points, metrics, for example, including effort, how easy it was to accomplish what you want. Those are good metrics often to have across the different touch points and the different journeys that help you complement your overall CSATs. But the drivers, I think it's important to think about them carefully. Other question we have, we consistently find episode feedback to be very positive, even if broader surveys show customer perceptions are poor. We have a rule out sample bias, but any insight into why our feedback is too positive? Do you have any? Yeah, you say you have bias. So maybe that's it. So it's going to have any bias on sending out the surveys?
With that, it can be dependent on how have you distributed the survey. Do you have an incentive? You know, you have to think about when you reach out to them, how have you worded the questions? Have you know, placed positive metrics ahead and then left the poor metrics at the end. So you need to have a look at that as well.
Yeah, so sorry, I misread this. You said that you have ruled out sample bias. Yeah, it's maybe looking at when are you triggering those questions. And as Ngoc mentioned, is that associated with, yeah, I think when you trigger, and the question types, like, do you have actually a bias already on your questions? The reason I say when you trigger those questions, maybe you actually send in the questions too early, and then that is reflecting on later surveys. So we have another one. We have a couple more minutes, which I think is fine to complete these two questions. We are in the process and building out our VOC architecture. Our customer base is small, several thousands, with high need contact clients. How frequently should we survey our customers? And should these differ by touch points or journey surveys? Conscious of survey fatigue. Well, at Proximo, we have our own customer experience program, and we don't have thousands of customers yet, but we do apply. So I'm not aware of your business. I think ultimately the best way to look at is what's the journey your customer is going to go through, and on that journey, really identifying the key elements of the key stages of that journey, and what is the time space in between those stages. Like in that same example, in the ideal world for customers that we engage with them on a long term, we will do a survey post kickoff because that helps us understand whether or not the customer understood the requirements. And then we do 8 weeks in a pulse check, and then we do a final survey at the end of, as we close the project, which might be, another 7 weeks or so later. So I don't think this idea of customer service fatigue, you can always start and review whether or not your responses are dropping. But I think if you trigger the service at the right time, customers will typically respond. Obviously, you don't want to send 3 surveys in 1 week, but if your customer timeline is weeks and months, look at a general rule that we use. One survey
30 days.
every 30 days.
Some like to do 60, some like to do 90.
Yeah.
So it's going to be dependent on your
audience.
Yeah.
And then we have 2 more questions. How do we get started if we want to work with Qualtrics to measure satisfaction and drivers? What products will be suitable? I can't answer this question without understanding your business a little bit more. But happy to connect with you offline, and maybe we can discuss and I'll give you my feedback. In general, most customers start with what is called the foundational license, and that gives you pretty good functionality, not the full suite of the functionality, but you will have the drivers, you have the ability to do some digital experience feedback, you have integrations with various different systems. So it's usually a really good baseline, and then over time you can move on to other parts of the platform. But happy to give that feedback on a one-on-one specific to your organization. We also found cultural impact. So we have the same to positive feedback. We also found the cultural impact. We had lots of feedback from people in cultures where negative feedback is from open. That can happen too. Some companies, we know that New Zealand typically gives less positive feedback than Australia, for example. So that's something to take in consideration. My recommendation is, depending on how you structure your survey, sometimes just hanging up too much on the score itself may not be helpful. Ask those follow-up questions, right? And you try to understand from the follow-up questions, being drivers or open-ended, what exactly your customers are saying that may not necessarily be shown on the CSAT score. For example, asking the question, if you find the satisfaction is always positive, asking a question, what can we do to improve? They will sort of going to bring in some more possibly areas or negative comments that actually give you the ability to act on the feedback. I think that's it. We answer all the questions. It's been great to be here with you today. I'm just going to put up the QR code survey up again. Yeah, we look forward to see you again on our next webinar. We'll be in touch and yeah, see you next time. Thank you.
Thank you.